Matt Miller, one of ESPN's lead draft analysts, came on the program yesterday, and we asked him about some of these wide receivers in this class. A lot of people not super high on some of the first-round wide receivers here in 2023. Well, Matt Miller is a big fan of one of these guys.
So I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba, people are going to overthink that he got hurt. People are going to overthink that he didn't run a 40-yard dash at the combine, and they're going to miss that at 6'1" and 200 pounds, he had one of the greatest three-ton and short shuttle workouts of all time. He had a flawless position workout. That's the stuff that matters to me. You know, playing wide receiver, I would rather you have short area quickness, body control, and balance as opposed to being really straight line fast.
So Matt Miller, a big fan of JSN, and Cody, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been high on Jaxon Smith-Njigba. He's been your number one wide receiver in this class for a while now. Can't imagine Matt Miller's comments are changing your mind.
Jaxon Smith-Njigba impressed the NFL a ton at the combine. He didn't even have to run fast in a straight line. And I know there's been some conversations, and part of the overthink is, well, a lot of it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba's success at Ohio State was from the slot. Folks, if you can get open, you can get open. You can get open on corners. You can get open. If you can get open, you can get open. I don't care where he lines up. He's going to get open. He's going to be a really good player in the National Football League, regardless of how fast he runs in a straight line at Ohio State next month. Okay? So I really like Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I want to add to it. Bruce Feldman, who covers college football for The Athletic, but he was around the combine and talked to some of the people that he knows in the NFL and some of the scouts that he talked to. This is what Feldman wrote in The Athletic the other day. I'll be stunned if Jaxon Smith-Njigba doesn't have a bunch of 100-catch seasons in the National Football League, and I think he'll go higher than I've seen some in early mock drafts put him.
Wow.
Of all the wonderful Ohio State receivers that have come out of Brian Hartline's wide receiver room the past few years, rival coaches I spoke to thought he was the best prospect to this point. Mind you, number 1 and number 2 for Offensive Rookie of the Year last year were his teammates, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Now, Feldman did note Marvin Harrison Jr. will be the best prospect to come out of Ohio State at the wide receiver spot next year.
Yeah.
That's why I put the caveat to this point. But I love Jaxon Smith-Njigba. He's the only wide receiver I would use the 12th overall pick on. And I understand there's potential to replicate some of what John Mechie does, and we believe Mechie's going to be a slot guy in the NFL. I believe they can both get open, and I believe they can both get open from the slot and the outside. It's not ideal to have two guys that sort of overlap to that level, but if you feel like you have to have a guy that catches the ball, I'll take the guy that can get open and catches the ball, and I'll figure out how he gets open versus, oh, well, he's taller and can run faster in a straight line. I'll take the other guy.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's going to be there at 12.
He may not.
With the emphasis on the wide receiver position in today's NFL, there might be a team that falls in love with this guy. Like, I don't know. I think everyone's assuming in most mock drafts you look at say that the Texans, if they want a wide receiver, they're going to have their choice at number 12 because none of them are going to go in the top 11. I don't know if it's going to be like that the closer and closer we get to draft time, and it feels like more and more people are catching JSN fever right now. I will say this. He was in the slot in college because of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Like, it's not like he was incapable of lining up outside. It's like, no, there were 2 first-round picks who were also really good at football, who were older than Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who were lined up on the outside. Like, that's where they were better, so that's where they were playing. It wasn't a, JSN's just not very good, so we'll throw him in the slot. No, that's just not how it worked in Columbus. And one more quick thing about those 2 wide receivers, they both said Jaxon Smith-Njigba was the most athletic of the 3. Both Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave within the last year have been asked, hey, who was the most athletic of you 3? Because that wide receiver room was bonkers. We're talking about 3 first-round picks. You said it. The 2 guys who were already in the league were finalists or very close to it for Rookie of the Year. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave both said JSN. He's the most athletic. He's a freak. That says something, that those guys who are athletic freaks and already having success in the league were heaping that type of praise on Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
I love the conversation about, hey, well, if he was so good, why didn't they put him outside and put one of the other guys inside? Him being in the slot was about how good he was and how much those guys couldn't do that. How Olave and Garrett Wilson couldn't do what he could do from the slot. And, yeah, he played a lot with them, and that probably helped him get open. Remember the bowl game where he was the big-time wide receiver playing, and he had, 1 million yards in that bowl game?
I think you're rounding down.
Yeah, 2 million yards in that bowl game. We were robbed this past season of him not playing, the hamstring injury, and I'm assuming once that pops up and he realizes, yeah, Jamar Chase didn't even play a couple of years ago and then went 6th overall.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to go out there and force it.
Oh, yeah, he had the NFL bug.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes. So he didn't come back. He didn't force it. For wide receivers, not the biggest deal in the world. You just need some success that you need to put on tape, and he's got success to put on tape. I really, really like him. I do think there will be a conversation about teams maybe hopping the Texans to get in front of them to draft Jaxon Smith-Njigba along the lines of what the Detroit Lions did a year ago when they jumped in front of the Texans to get Jamison Williams, who I believe the Texans wanted to draft with their first-round pick last year. So I think, by the way, if Tennessee solved some of their offensive line issues in free agency, Tennessee's the team that should select him. He'd be the best pass catcher on that team right away.
Mm-hmm.
Like at 11, the Titans should think about him. It's probably an overkill for the Eagles. They don't need him. But, the Eagles get somebody to feel froggy, and they do what they do, and they move around a little bit.
Yeah.
Somebody jumps up to 10 to get Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I like him. I believe he'd pair incredibly with Bryce Young. He'd obviously pair incredibly with C.J. Stroud if you drafted him at number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you have Stroud, you got to take JSN at 12.
Yes, sign me up.
Yeah.
And look, my preference, again, is still, if you feel like there's a really, really good defensive lineman, grab that defensive lineman, stick him there with DeMeco Ryans, let that guy get coached up, and hopefully you've got a dominant defender in a couple of years. But of all the conversations about 12, I will allow myself to think wide receiver with Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
That's what I want. I don't think the Texans are fun enough to go QB wide receiver with their 2 first-round picks. I think they'll balance it out. I think they'll go offense and defense. But, yeah, if you end up with C.J. Stroud, it'd be nice to have his favorite college target right there with him. That would be a lot of fun. And I will say this. I'm not comparing these 2 players at all. We're not talking about Jordan Addison here. Like, Jordan Addison is tiny. Okay, he's 5'11", 173. That is small. That's a guy who can only play in the slot. JSN is 6'1". He's about 200. DeAndre Hopkins at the Combine was 6'1". He was a little over 210, a little bit bigger. But, did DeAndre Hopkins have any problem playing on the outside in the NFL at 6'1"? Like, you don't need to be 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". If you're strong and you can get open, you can have some success out there as well. He just runs routes so incredibly well, man. He's smooth. He's fluid. He's got a quick change of direction. I'm a fan, man. I'm a bigger fan now than I was before the Combine, and I already was a fan before. Yeah, he's not going to be a 4-3 guy, a 4-4 guy. So what? He can get open. He's got good playing speed. I think he'd be a great, great pick for the Texans at number 12.
I wonder how draft nicks compare Jaxon Smith-Njigba just from a size perspective, from a weight perspective. It's kind of the same as Terry McLaurin. He's a little bit taller and not quite as heavy as Terry McLaurin. Scary Terry was obviously good at Ohio State. He's been very good in the league with a bunch of crappy quarterbacks for the Commanders. And so just the idea of pairing up a big-time Ohio State wide receiver prospect with a good quarterback, which these guys haven't had a good quarterback yet. Olave and Wilson did that last year with Andy Dalton and Zach Wilson primarily throwing him the football.
Great point.
Like, imagine if you put a good quarterback with Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Like, the NFL success could be through the roof.